Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Welcome to USAPrepares.com. I am Rich Scheben from offgridmontana.com, sitting in for Vincent Finelli today, and our regular guest on Thursdays is Dr. Rick Miller. And we're going to talk, we spoke privately last night, we're going to talk about a few things. I want to have him give an update on his encyclopedia. He has a personal story of forgiveness he wants to talk about. We're going to talk about a Condoleezza Rice article, political correctness, maybe big pharma. We're just going to not hold back, say it like it is, and basically share with the American people that the elite are trying to do everything possible to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people by groups. So we're going to address all that. Of course, we probably won't have time to get into a lot of detail because time just goes by so fast. But let me introduce our guest, Dr. Rick Miller. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning. It was a pleasure talking with you last night, Rich. And I don't know if everybody knows this, but Rich is responsible for helping me produce the encyclopedia. His name will be going into several of my books with thanks, like several others that have donated money to me. Rich is a personal friend and somebody that I respect. He's got some stories that are fascinating. So I did want to mention good morning, Grace Thorne, Linda from Lexington, and I also wanted to say something important to people. Lexmark, the guy that's in charge of the customer support, is actually a real person, and he has personally contacted me when I got my brand new printer to do the audiobooks, and I wanted to specifically mention he's from the Philippines, where I grew up. I would pronounce his name as Russell, but he is part of their support team. And this man has personally gone up to try to help me, not because of who I am or what I am. He had no clue, but I did. And I am now saying that I have found for the first time this year true customer support with Lexmark. I was impressed with the way they're handling my needs. Anyway, that's what I had to say for messages. There it is.
Well, that's great, Rick, and thank you again for your kind words. And it's not like I owe Rick money or he lost a bet to me, folks. He says it like it is from the heart, and I appreciate that about Rick. Now,
I'm a little kid. I don't think about what I'm going to say. I just kind of do it and get in all sorts of trouble. Political correctness is one. Well, I do. I'm spontaneous.
Yeah, and that's the way to be, because political correctness has really destroyed America. It really has.
Well, this female bashing thing that's going on needed to happen, and yet the way it's happening may backfire on everybody, not just the men doing it or the women accusing the men. And, what do you do when you do the first kiss when you're a kid? How does that work? I reached for her. She reached for me. Who is politically correct and who is being aggressive? Well, I remember when I did my first kiss, I was scared. I didn't want to be rejected. I was, by the way. Was I going to go to jail?
Well, it's getting to be very ambiguous today. Very, I even put a little...
How about those restrooms that are cross-sexual now? And they're talking about doing them in high schools. That's nuts. That's crazy.
It's an example of the parents not having any rights in the states raising today's children. That's why our divorce rate is over 70%. You kick the fathers out of the home, and you eliminate responsibility, you eliminate discipline, you eliminate a lot of things. You eliminate family, and that's part of the plan of action of the elitists. And, you know, since you started on this topic, let's talk about this. I have this article from the dailycaller.com. It basically paraphrased down from CNN, and basically kind of Lisa Rice was talking about she was afraid, and I'm going to paraphrase it further because we just don't have enough time to read the whole article, but she's afraid of women turning into snowflakes and infants. And, you know, the allegations against of Weinstein, you know, a lot of elite celebrities are saying this is a witch hunt, this is manufactured, and I think a lot has to do with pedophilia, and the powers that be are not liking what Trump is doing.
I wanted to say something about pedophilia, just one moment. That is a ritual that was meant for immortality that was written in the 13th century. And back then, the grimoires in magic were superstitious because they were just coming into the Dark Ages with the Knights of the Temple and the wars that were going on between Muslims and the Catholic Church. And I have to tell you something. Having sex with a child is not going to make you younger. News flash, and that's from the real Dr. Strange. What it's going to do is damage that child forever. And most of us are coming from wounds. Our way of behavior comes from past wounds and or wounds that our parents suffered. And so pedophilia is also usually a learned behavior. They watched someone else do it before they did it themselves. And that's
in a lot of cases, Rick, you are correct. And there's very little chance of a child who turns into an adult who was abused like this to have a normal life. And this is one of the reasons why I use it in the book, and I use it on the air, this particular term, adult mutual consensual sex. If that was in the law, if people use that, see, this is why the mainstream media wants to control the narrative, the theme, the meme, the talking point, because their job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. And they want to hold on to those narratives, and this is why they don't discuss pedophilia. And this is why it's up to the new media or the alternative media to do this. But let me go back to this article and just read some of the key points that Rice said in this. And she's worried that men will be, maybe it's just better not to have women around. Maybe that's what they're going to be thinking. And this is a big worry to her. And, you know, and there's another article that was on Drudge Report this morning from Bridget Bardot. And I'll quote what she says here. Lots of actresses try to play the tease with producers to get a role. And then, when we talk about them, they say they're being harassed. And I was never a victim of sexual harassment. In fact, she found it charming that men told me that she was beautiful. And her comments come a week after French star Catherine Deneuve sparked worldwide feminist backlash by defending men's rights to hit on women. You know, we're getting to this Me Too victim group status theme is getting to the point where, and I'm going to go off into a little tangent and give a little background on some of the stories that's in the book and what has happened to me personally. My plan A, when I was living in New York City, folks, to come out to Montana was to get a job with the New York City Fire Department. That was the year that the feminists, the women's group, sued because they could not pass the physical test, so they sued to lower the bars of standards and expectations. My plan B was to get a college degree in forestry and come on board with that to the Northern Rockies and work for the National Forest Service. Well, I went to an interview. They told me they would not hire me as a white male. They hired two girls in the waiting room. Now, when I was in the pharmaceutical industry for over 20 years, and I was diagnosed while working for GlaxoSmithKline with spinal stenosis and nerve damage, and I had neurosurgeons writing to my company saying that Rich needs to reduce his driving by 50%, and guess what? they told me, Human Resources told me that part-time job shares were for women only. Now, this is a company, GlaxoSmithKline, that's pled guilty to bribery, fraud, and other crimes while fabricating drug safety data and lying to the FDA and defrauding Medicare and Medicaid out of billions of dollars. So when you Americans start running out of your Medicare and Social Security, when big companies like GlaxoSmithKline that has billions of dollars of cash in their coffers have taken it away from you, what are you going to do? So pardon my, I digress there, but we've gotten to the point where when people talk about a divide and conquer strategy, they don't talk about the aftermath, which is lowering the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job. This is degrading, this is disrespectful, and this shows how desperate the left are, which have been basically taken over by the globalists, and the mainstream media and the court system is bought and paid for, in other words, owned. Even Dr. Ben Carson said, first words out of his mouth, I heard him do it live when he came to Western Montana. I hate political correctness. When you're politically correct, you turn minorities into victims. Candace Owens from Red Pill Black, she admitted to being a feminist lady, and she just said very publicly on television she doesn't want to be a victim because she's black and female. Now, there's so many good women, good minorities, Diamond and Silk, Brandon Tatum, that have woken up to the fact that it's not a left-right paradigm. It's an aristocracy-serfdom relationship. Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood, this is on video. She's a Democrat, and audio. Planned Parenthood was used to control the black population. Obama doubled black unemployment. By the way, do you know that Trump has got some of the lowest black unemployment numbers ever? I mean, African-American countries are selling blacks as slaves right now with Sharia law. We've gotten to the point that the information is being censored by the Googles, by the Facebooks, by the Twitters, and not getting to the people. And this is why the people have to read and research for themselves and think for themselves. Because when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting and keeping a job, you're destroying America by rewarding mediocrity. And Rick, after the break, I'd love to hear your comment on what I just said in my little rant. Thank you. Good morning, America. Welcome back to USAPrepares.com. I am Rich Scheben with OffGridMontana.com, sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And our guest is Dr. Rick Miller. Rick, thank you for being patient and letting me do my rant. And I'm just going to ask your opinion on that and ask you one specific question before you even go into some detail. But do you think when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for certain groups, when the elites say you can't compete or your work is suboptimal, and the fact that it degrades and disrespects and insults the work ethic, ability, and the intelligence of all these groups, basically meant to make the populace submissive and break our will, it's pretty obvious that you're not going to, by rewarding mediocrity and destroying America through hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications, increase ingenuity, productivity, knowledge, innovation, and things that have made us great. Dr. Rick Miller.
What was the question? I'm not sure what you just said.
The question is, do you empower people or a country or groups or individuals by lowering the bars of standards and expectations based on what group they're in?
Morals and ethics, yeah. I have quoted this. It's in my book. Ducky Mallard once on NCIS said, that when asked what was the difference between a moral man and an ethical man, and he said, well, an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't. Everybody's different, and everybody has a different standard of morals. And for me, I don't believe that my values are necessarily correct. They are for me at this juncture in my time, but I evolve. And so to make judgment on another has often gotten me in more trouble than it has correcting a situation. I remember once when I was in a line at the post office, And this customer got so angry, he started to grab the woman behind the counter. And I asked him if he would like to go to jail because I was prepared to stop his act right then, right now. And he backed off. The woman ended up taking a 1-year leave from the U.S. Postal Service, and everybody suffered because the Postal Service wasn't able to replace her. She was on medical leave, and there was less people to take our line. And so I don't know who that man was, but that's what he did in his single act of anger. Now, I was driving to Salem one day, and I stopped in Eugene at the first store I could find. It was a bookstore, and walked in and asked for directions. And the woman behind the counter was very quick and pulled out a phone book and was able to get a map immediately of the area and told me where it was. And I, by accident, did something politically incorrect, and I said, good girl. I mean, I was impressed with her. And she got angry at me and was going to come around the counter and beat me up. Now, no. You see, in Oregon, this is a haven, like California used to be in the Castro district for gay men. This is a recovery place for battered women. And Tom Robinson, an old friend of mine, wrote about one of these havens for recovery called Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. Now, I immediately apologized, but that woman was not interested in my apologies, and I meant it sincerely because I had no clue that I had done something wrong. There is a distinction in some women not liking to be called a girl. And it was, okay, this is it. I'm running it down. Ashland is where they bring them in. Eugene is where they start their recovery, and Portland is where they turn them back out in the world. And I'm going to say some more further things. Gayness in women is not the opposite of gayness in men, as you would normally think in terms of normal concepts of androgyny. And James Hillman has written a book on that called Anima and Animus, and the distinctional difference between gayness in men and gayness in women. They're quite different, and they come from a different level of wounding. It's an extremely important book, and other religious beliefs aside, like Shira law, I watched when Pharrell Williams did his happiness song, and a bunch of Iranian girls, they were high school age, walked down the street playing that music and dancing in the streets, and they were all summarily arrested. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, I can't make that kind of...
Rich, we're going to have to pick up at the other side of the break. Good morning, America. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli this morning. And my guest is Dr. Rick Miller. And, Rick, I want to comment on some of the things that you just said. And I'm going to bring up what you told me when we talked privately last night, what your girlfriend said about me. And it was a compliment. She said, you told me that she liked me because I had, quote unquote, both paddles in the water. And I said
she said some other things too.
I said it depends, and it depends on if am I in a rowboat? I got 2 oars in the water. Am I in a canoe by myself? I have 1 paddle in the water. So the answer to most questions, most scenarios is it depends. And the reason why that woman behind the post office went postal on you when you said the word girl is because it's basically synonymous to what Condoleezza Rice was saying regarding that she's afraid that women are going to turn into snowflakes and infants and that men won't want to be around them anymore. See, there's a certain common denominator. Well, let me finish. There's a certain common denominator out there that built America, and that's hard work, effort, proven results, qualifications, and things like that. You mentioned things like ethic, morals, and values. Now, I always talk about how we have to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. But I can obviously, under rules, put subsets like ethics, morals, and values. Under accountability, I can put subsets like consequences for one's behavior. But unfortunately in America, because of political correctness, we have a different set of ethics, morals, values, and consequences for one's behavior based on what group you're in, aristocracy versus the serfs. What is your gender, your race? And, of course, we're all the same human race, but they use ethnicity as race synonymously, sex, religion, ideology, generation, etc. So what we've done is this divide and conquer strategy that has been implemented by the elites the consequences have been horrific for America because it's lowered the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job. And when you do that and reward mediocrity for decade after decade after decade, you would destroy America from within. And that's why I say productivity, innovation, ingenuity, knowledge is only becoming available for the super wealthy or the elite and not the bottom 93%. And this is why we got to get rid of this left-right paradigm philosophy, because this is manufactured perception by the mainstream media. And we have to start thinking for ourselves. So when you bring these things to light, the powers that be demonize, discredit, and delegitimize all the people through their fake mediums, and this is why they're called fake news. In fact, we should talk a little bit about fake news today, Rick, as well, since it's an obvious bridge or tangent to go into here. But please go ahead and comment.
Well, I'm not sure where to pick this up, but what I guess I'm wanting to say is, I one time when I was younger, I winked at a woman and she slapped my face. I didn't know what to do. I was embarrassed, I was angry, and I was ashamed. I guess the first rule is you're not supposed to touch another person in anger. And that's the rule I first follow. I will never touch anyone in anger. I won't do it. That was one of the rules I trained SEALs. Even in combat, you never do it out of anger. It's you use anger as a tool, like you would using it as a tool against someone. If I can get someone I'm competing with angry, I can beat them, because I can use their anger against themselves in a boxing match or other kind of thing. Now, instinct is different, and instinct is a way of working with future timelines. And when you work from that place of first response, that's normally always the most correct thing. We make errors, and we misread, and we learn lessons. That's why it's there as a first response. So it's a learning process. And I'm concerned. Have you seen the new movie, The Post, with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks? Rick, I see so few. If I see two movies a year,
there's a point I want to make. It's all junk. It's all subliminal messaging going, to control the American people, make them think a certain way.
The Post was a time when I was working out of the Pentagon, and the Pentagon papers were released. That was a big deal for me. I watched Richard Nixon. The way they portrayed him in the movie is probably accurate, and yet what I met when I would go into his office for the Pentagon, I found him to be one of the most intelligent men I've ever met. And there was a concerted effort to bring him down. And that was what happened to Richard Nixon, was that he was the first president to literally be impeached. And when I say that, the Post is no longer, 30 years later, is no longer the Post that I remembered, with Watergate and the rest of it, breaking in. That's how the movie ends, breaking into the Republican, I think it's a Republican Party national headquarters. Now, something else is going on here, and it's a false flag, because while we're all watching the one thing happen, the men being bashed as they should for groping, thinking they have control of a situation and using that for sex, while that's all happening, guess what else is happening with the other hand? It's picking your pocket. It's called sleight of hand or laser main. And I am telling you that none of this BS is real. and that the genuineness of American and the way most Americans, it's in Hollywood and places of power where this kind of thing, except maybe in Oregon, we have a lot of what do they call that? Men beating women up. We have a lot of that here in Oregon because of the educational thing. Our high school graduation level is at 73%. It's the worst it's second, they say it's second worst in the country, and it's because of good old boy networking. And I found some letters of recommendation from 30 years ago when I was teaching at Road Community College, and even in the letters of recommendation, they said that the old boy constituents here were concerned about my ideas. And that today has reached and ramped up to the point where even the local police are broken. That means they're unfixable. When I say broken like medicine, it means there's no way out of that one. It's gone. And we have a situation across America that has broken records. I mean, they're broken. They're not going to be able to be fixed. When I was in Missouri with Vincent, I watched the distinctional difference between the one part of the state's law enforcement and the other. And that was when we were doing a workshop, and an NRAP and power vehicle showed up and worried that I was teaching some kind of, me doing a workshop on survival and ESP, and the police showed up thinking I was a terrorist. What? It was amazing. I even had saw weapons drawn in my workshop, and that's nuts. Now, what's going on? Well, power corrupts, and ultimate power corrupts ultimately. And that is why Castaneda said that is the second enemy of man. Fear, power, clarity of mind, like you see clearly now what's going on. And finally, the one I experience most, the fourth, old age, too old to do anything about it. Now, I'm going to try to walk my talk and hope that children respect that as I act as a comic writer. I'm writing comics now. And I'm going to try to do moral codes of ethics and rules of conduct in my comics to give direction for insight. Ultimately, yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Well, Rick, I want to say that's all well said, and that's one of the reasons why I think we do these radio shows and talks around the country and things, is because we're waking people up to make them realize that everything, every message, whether it be from politicians, the court system, the mainstream media, they're all bought and paid for. 5 companies own the newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, production companies, publishing companies, 5 companies. So it doesn't take many people to control the narrative. But people are realizing that everything from the top down is sanctioned. And that's why there's so much of this fake news, which I call bought and paid for news, which means that the people who are reading off the teleprompters are owned. So we need to change the process. Instead of it being everything, every word being sanctioned from the top down, we need to educate the people and give them confidence and make them do their own reading, their own researching, and speak for themselves and think for themselves. Because we have to change things from the bottom up. And the powers that be are using everything to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people by groups.
Well, that's why Kucinich called himself president of the Midwest and is going to suggest that the United States is going to fragment down into 9 provinces. And basically, I'm going to say something further. That's Plan B on Agenda 21 because it's easier to rule a bunch of small countries as it is one large one. Now, basically, we're at war with something, and I'm not sure what it is yet. I have ideas about what the deep state is and what it might imply, but we're going through a money crisis thing, and really, our single most important value or resource is our children. And that's where they are hitting us in the educational pocket, and these weird laws where they're commingling and confusing children with restroom identification over political correctness. It's a mixed message that's happening now. I don't have an answer for it either. However, what I do believe in is maritime law.
Well, Rick, we will hit that up after the break. And stay with us, folks. Good morning, America. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli. And our guest today is Dr. Rick Miller. Rick, let me just comment on some of the things you said about political correctness and teaching our kids about choosing gender and sex and basically sexualizing our children. That's one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier the term adult mutual consensual sex. If we had that, I think that's one of the reasons why the elite are going after Trump so hard. It's because he said two things. He wants to give America back to the people, and he really is attacking the pedophilia rings out there, and he's already arrested thousands of these adults who have been doing this. And these poor kids who will never have a normal life when you have that kind of trauma at that age, it really is sad. And I think that's one of the reasons we're talking about this. But you're a PhD. You've written and read probably who knows how many books in your life, but we're all aware of the Marxist, Alinsky, Frankfurt School, Cloward Piven, Communist Manifesto, Kool-Aid that the powers that be are trying to force down our throat of political correctness. And this is why they use the term group or identity politics. What it really is group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status. In other words, lowering the bars of standards and expectations to make us submissive and break our will so they can call us all controversial extremists, racist, bigots, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, conspiracy theorist, intolerant, violent hater with an anti in front of every word and ism, ist, or phobia in the back of every word they can think of. And this is one of the reasons that we do these shows, is to make people realize that we can think for ourselves, and if we don't have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody in American soil, things are just going to be more divided, and we're going to turn the United States of America into the divided groups of America, which we basically have. And this is why we need to stand for principle, and that's truth, the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. If somebody else does it and has less consequences of their behaviors because of what group they're in, then everybody can do it. And if people don't like that because they say, well, two wrongs don't make a right, then let's do practice what you preach laws, which I say on almost every radio show I'm on in America, but I don't hear the elites willing to do that because they don't want accountability for themselves. Rick?
I don't know where to go with that. Maritime law, though, I did want to make one comment, means that you're captain and commander of your own ship. Now, that's in my definition, not the definition, mine. There's flags and there's laws and things like that, but basically what I'm trying to suggest is a level of sovereignty. Sovereignty, there's three ways. This is the way Moda, African Lodge OTO, put it once. There's three ways of being in this world. There's the vulgar, the adept, and the exempt. The vulgar get audited, the adept gets money back from the government, and the exempt has a 501c3. They don't pay taxes. They're outside. Now, today we call those rights and privileges. It's a right to do this. It is a privilege to do that. I am appalled at the concept of privileges and why I would be favored over someone else because I'm smarter, I'm stronger, or I'm weaker. It doesn't make sense, those concepts in my universe. My universe, however, is mutually exclusive of my neighbor. And so that's why we have property and a fence. And the fence can have a gate in it. Mine always did, so that my neighbor did not have to climb my fence to come see me or help me. I always put a gate in there. If I didn't like my neighbor, I put a lock on the gate, but the gate existed. Now, that means that you are allowing someone else to come in with their values that might supersede your own.
Rick, we will finish your thought on the other side of the break. America, thanks for listening. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Good morning, America. This is Rich Scheben from OffGridMontana.com, sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And our guest is Dr. Rick Miller. And it was a long break, Rick, but I'll just make a couple comments, and then I'll let you get back on your rant. I agree with pretty much everything you said before the break, but I believe also that we're all imperfect sinners, and we need a checks and balance system. We need to protect humanity, and that is, we do need to protect our young and old. So I think that we do on occasion have to say please, thank you, I'm sorry, because the fact that we are imperfect sinners. And what my main mission is in life when I'm on the radio anyway is to try to stick up for the little guy that has no restitution, the little guy who has no protection under the law, the little guy who can no longer control their own destiny because we have a separate set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what victim group or protectionist group you're from, which has obviously lowered the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job. So with all the elite degrading and disrespecting all these groups, the odds of synergy is getting lower and lower unless we wake the people up to the fact that America's being destroyed from inside. And when you reward mediocrity in a system that's about to head into a whole new industry, a whole new realm of thinking with robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, and this technocracy is going to steal tens of millions of jobs over the next few decades, there's not going to be a lot of availability for people to control their own destiny. And this is why we are talking about outside-the-box ideas, as we always do on shows like USAPrepares.com, and give people different ideas and solutions on how to combat all these headwinds of individual future growth and opportunity. So with that said, Rick, please continue.
I don't know where to go with this. Maybe we've said, or I've said enough on this subject, and we'll just move to something else. I just wonder, and it's interesting the way Vincent puts it, that we discuss what we're going to talk about, and then we never go back to that subject again ever. You're going to find that's the way I am. For example, I was talking to you last night about smart bullets. How many people know about the new weapons that are coming out? I don't think people realize. We have a weapon now that is the size of your thumb. It's a very small drone. It's an insect. You can put a camera in it. That's what they did 5 years ago with a drone that is the size of your finger, has a camera, and is a fly on the wall watching business meetings. That was 5 years ago. This year, it runs by an AI that is a third-generation D-Wave that has an explosive charge in it that will kill a human being. And that smart bullet can hover, it can anticipate what you're going to do, and it moves 100 times faster than you. That means if you go to swat it or to push it away, it moves away 100 times faster, and the AI knows more than 28 minutes ahead of you what you're going to do before you even have thought of it in terms of running for safety. Page 2. I watched this picture of an aircraft deploying 10,000 of those over a very small town by a terrorist. This was on TED, and you call it Smart Bullet, TED Lectures, whatever. You can watch a physical demonstration of how effective this thing is when the guy throws it up in the air and tells it what to do with a little computer. And that's now being run by an AI that can run 10,000 of them simultaneously, each one with your name on it. Now,
Absolutely.
With that said, that's a weapon that exists right now. And imagine where we're going to go tomorrow morning. You can't imagine. And it's, with XXX and having that little bullet anticipate where the guy is with a bazooka and taking out, that's old TV. Today, we have that happening in politics, not weapons, but knowing what the politician is going to do, knowing how you are going to vote by the color of your car. Now, I'm going to say something further. We are moving into a brave new world, and what is about to happen you couldn't even imagine a science fiction story yet has not even been written. I've been trying to post some of those on my Facebook. When I run across a story that I think is important to me, that's because I'm now working with my future timelines, and I instinctively know it's going to be a problem. And right now, we have a problem with a group trying to take out our president, like they did Richard Nixon, Kennedy, and others like that. That was Lyndon Baines Johnson with Little Lady Bird. And I have to tell you, I was there to witness all of this. I have seen what I've seen, and I have a deep concern because there is no regard to our natural rights, our physical rights, and the laws. Did you know there's a law right now in place on the correct way to sneeze in public? Why? Well, I can understand with the flu epidemic and chemtrail deployment of it. I have a concern on who's doing what to whom. And basically, the first weapon deployed is fear. And it was Benjamin Franklin that said, you give up a right to protect yourself, and you give up both rights. And
well said, Rick.
I don't know where we're going to go with this. That's why I don't value the consensus. What I value is what's inside my heart, because my parents tried to raise me correctly. And that's where you start. Minding your own ship before you even concern yourself about someone else's. And you don't have a right to make judgment. That's a Christian value that most Christians do not abide. And they make judgment. That is the thing that distinguishes a Christian from a Muslim. That's a seen gospel. And there it is. It's about time we start looking at ourselves before we concern ourselves with others. And if you do that, you will change things. That is how it works. You start with yourself. Before you start criticism, you better take a look at your home and the way you run your place. Now, with that said, I think there's too many people in the world. I mean, that's what a big city is about, because that's where you find your work, and everybody needs money. I'm broke. I have no money. I have less than $1,000 between me and the streets. I'm like most American. I have no reserves. And so I am right there in the immediacy of what am I going to do at this moment in terms of gasoline and food. Now, with that said, I also am wealthier than anyone I know. I have friends that will do anything for me. It's a place of security. It's a place of center. And I think that that's where our real problem is that there's so much white noise around us, we lose that inner voice. And that it is that inner voice that holds the true answers on how to solve everything. And once you start to listen, it's just one thing at a time. And that's the second thing, distractions, where you have a bunch of what you assume are problems, and you miss the real problem of the bearing going out in your truck, and you're stuck out in the street somewhere thinking about the world's problems. It's immediacy and prioritizing of what's important first. And I think the first thing that everybody should realize is that before you make judgment on anybody else, you better take a close look at yourself. And that's what I've tried to do, and boy, have I found myself wanting. I am truly not where I want to be. It is a process. It takes a lot of time, but that's okay. Time's not real. And truthfully, you don't have running out of time. You always have enough to take care of your problems. Always.
Well, Rick, you said a lot there, and I'll try to address some of the things you just said. I've seen the smart bullets. I've seen the videos on it. I've seen how they have facial recognition, and they can pick out any individual they want. And it's very scary, and that's one of the reasons why we need to wake up the masses. And to talk about what you said about taking care of your home first, and that's what we talk about, I think, regarding immigration and, take care of our own home before we bring in other people who might be low skill, low information, different cultures, etc. We have to take care of our home. And with more specificity on that, I talk about that all the time, and in a similar context, but in different semantics. And that is practice what you preach laws. Because I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say the words hypocrisy or double standards, or that's the way it is, that'll never change. Basically, if you know anybody who says these things, folks, they're basically poster boys or girls, see I said boys and girls, for ignorance, apathy, and indifference. And this is where we're going to go next, Rick. We'll probably get the music coming up for a break shortly, but I want to talk a little bit about heroes. In other words, whistleblowers. Because whistleblowers, whether they be coming from Big Pharma, from the medical system, from the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, it doesn't matter. People are putting their foot down, saying, hey, we are not obliged to follow the same rules, laws, and accountability as we say we are. We have a mission statement to protect the people, but we are not doing that. And this is why we need to welcome whistleblowers. And I want to talk about one who has been on the news in several different websites lately, and his name is Kevin Shipp. And this man is a hero. I believe his website is fortheloveoffreedom.net. He's a CIA whistleblower, and as I predicted, the music is coming up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what he said recently. And people, this is what we need. We need heroes. And we're going to talk about that after the break. Good morning, America. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli from offgridmontana.com. Our guest today is Dr. Rick Miller. And for those of you who might be new listeners, I want to talk about what I mean by practice what you preach laws, just in case you haven't heard about what I said. And then I'm going to go into this hero whistleblower. And, for example, when companies talk about discrimination laws, but it's dependent on what group you're in, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status. And this is why the mainstream media and the powers that be want to label it as identity politics, because they want to keep you dumbed down so you can't connect the dots. I even had a lawyer tell me when I was consulting 30 different attorneys, when they told me that when I was diagnosed with spinal stenosis and nerve damage, that I couldn't do a part-time job share because I wasn't female. I had a lawyer tell me I did not have enough group self-pity points as a white male. Now, here's another example: gun protection laws. When you hear about some of these wealthy people who say we need to get rid of guns, whether they be politicians or multi-gazillionaires, and yet they have the audacity to hire private security guards, often by taxpayer dollars, to hire security guards to carry weapons to protect them. This should be unacceptable. Another great practice what you preach law is carbon footprints. How many times have you heard about producers, directors, actors, singers talking about how we need to have carbon tax and global warming is such an issue, yada, 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 yada. But they're flying around the world in jets, often private jets, living in huge houses, often multiple houses, having a carbon footprint that's 10 million times what the average Joe has. This is unacceptable, and we need to have practice what you preach laws. And I can write them so the words, all these politically correct buzzwords like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, inclusiveness, productivity, all this stuff would be have meanings of what these words actually are and not being hijacked by definitions. So, Rick, I want your opinion on this. Kevin Shipp, ex-CIA whistleblower, he's come out on several websites. I heard his interview, a really good interview done with Greg Hunter on USAWatchdog.com. And basically, he says in a nutshell that the DNC paid $12 million to former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele, basically to gather information from second and third-party sources, which they turned out to be Russian intelligence. And look at how many millions of dollars have been spent on the fake news on Trump being affiliated with the Russians, when here it is the Democrats and the DMC. And then John McCain, a neocon, a rhino, acted as a courier with the FBI and the CIA to leak the information with John Brennan to get these FISA warrants in order to spy on Donald Trump and his cabinet with the NSA. He even mentioned about how Comey covered up the Hillary crimes, and the Clinton Foundation basically closed because they were covering up treasonous bribes and crimes and money laundering. And this is all, they have all this information. And the Clinton Foundation closed in 24 hours at a period almost a year ago because of what had happened. And never mind Uranium One, where she literally sold 20% of our uranium to Russia and other countries, and some of that uranium, people don't even know where the heck it is. Not to mention the fact that they stole billions of dollars from Haiti, and yet they're saying Trump hates Haitians, even though he helped Rand Paul fund his medical trip to help Haitians with eye disorders. So between the fake news and what's going on here, this is what we need, whether it be smart bullets or whether it be corruption, manipulation, deception, nepotism, the powers that be trying to keep the status quo, which I call a incognito caste system. This is what we need, Rick. We need people to give information to the people and to say enough is enough. We need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, because we're at the point now, our intelligence agencies, CIA, FBI, NSA, I'm reading articles, people don't even know what to believe. Are they working for the American people, or are they working for the highest bidder? Rick Miller.
Who knows how to respond to that one? There's no way to know. Even the alternative news has curveballs. And, paranoia and association. You have to, everybody's got an agenda. It's about lobbying.
Rick, I'm going to give you more time after the break. And thanks for staying with us, America. We'll be back shortly. Good morning, America. Rich Scheben from OffGridMontana.com sitting in for Vincent Finelli with our guest, Dr. Rick Miller. And Rick, you mentioned about the agenda and the ambiguity of it. I really believe, and I think most Americans do, that the agenda is to keep us off balance, eliminate synergy, to create chaos and infighting, and a divide and conquer strategy which is designed to lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job, where the law of diminishing returns takes over, nobody cares, there's no value, no appreciation in anything. Rick, you have the floor.
Well, what made America great originally was that, in my own words, we were the best by the worst. But per dollar spent, you got more bang for your money when it was American-made. Now, that's all changed because even though something might be constructed in America, the raw material parts come from other countries now. And the screw that's supposed to be able to withstand 3,500 PSI no longer meets that standard because it was made with 305 rather than 316 stainless. Now, as a metaphor. And I'm doing that across the board from fast foods. By the way, fast foods aren't even fast anymore, down to the kinds of foods that we would consume because that's what they do next door, and that's what's on every corner in America. Now, I preferred Cheers, where you had a bar at the end of each block. I'm just kidding. But I'm finding that, this is no longer the country I served and protected. And I'm now discovering that was so even when I was serving and protecting. They say, thank you for your service. I said that to Lexmark. Thank you, because he is now trying, for example, to return the very basic concept of what customer service was about. It's not supposed to be about damage control. It's supposed to be about the next time you want to buy a tool, you go to Craftsman or Snap-on. Those no longer have any meaning. And it used to be you had a choice in what you could buy. You could buy cheapest or best buy. that no longer exists. The Best Buy no longer exists. What exists is 5 different cheapest, and they compete with each other on the way it's marketed. And I've watched these things change, where there's no more pride, because how can you have pride in what you do when you don't even believe in what you're doing? It's a catch-22 kind of situation. You don't have choice anymore. What is an illusion of choice is no longer right. What happened to Sears and Roebuck and their catalog? I remember when I was a boy, and the primary store was in Seattle, Washington. It was down on Spokane Street, and it was a 4-story building that I could get lost in, just in wonder, in the toy section when I was a child. It's different today, and I don't have answers to this, so I'm not going to concern myself with that part of it. What I'm going to concern myself with is how I live on my piece of property. I don't even own land. I'm that broke. I'm not that would suggest I don't even have a right to vote because I don't own land. Did you know that that's another kind of law? And I watched them take my property away from me when I had a little girl die of leukemia in my home. I've been there and done that. And I have ideas about Dornbecker's and the caregiving at Dornbecker's Nile Temple, the shrine supporting small children that are deathly ill. She had better caregiving at Rogue Valley Medical Center in Medford when she died, with the gay nurses in the children's wing. They had more compassion for her than they did at Dornbecker's with all their tools and toys up in Portland. I watched it, I experienced it, and I have serious issues now with the way medicine. The doctors up at Dornbecker's were more interested in their students than they were the children. It happened. I had one doctor that was going to have me ejected from the hospital, and I dared him to his face. That's when his head nurse reminded him who I was, and that was my little girl that I was questioning on why he was feeding her these foods. I had a right to ask, and yet I was going to be ejected from the hospital for bothering this medical doctor and challenging his knowledge base. How does that work? There's something wrong here, and I can't put my finger on it, so rather than try to do that, I start with myself. And
very, very well said. And basically, I know you don't like to talk about economics much, but you basically started that conversation, and you said it very well. But basically, I've been asking lately on the air, does cutting corporate taxes correlate to higher wages for employees? And the answer today is no, because of creative accounting. Even if earnings per share look good on paper, the corporate profits don't. And the corporations have gone away from our core business because they're protected by the fascist system. Only 4 to 6% of people make their primary income from being self-employed. So the fascist system of the big corporate oligarchies who will create an alliance with big government has changed the way business is done and lowered the quality of the goods and services, especially for the bottom 93%. And when they get money, especially free money from whether it be from the banks or the central banks, and they're getting very low, if any, interest rate, instead of putting it into their core business, getting rid of debt, new expansion, new products, new services, new people, new employees, raises for their employees, they are doing the following: share buybacks, dividends to their wealthy patrons, which 1% of the people own 83% of the stock, 10% own 96%. The average Joes don't own stock. Maybe a little bit in their 401ks or IRAs, but that is it. And lastly, executive cash through stock options to feather their own nest of the executives, especially the CEOs and CFOs. And then if there's any money left over, it goes into acquisitions and mergers to further enhance the fascist system so the small and medium-sized businesses can't compete with the lobbyists, the special interest groups, the PACs, etc. And this is what you're basically saying is what is happening. And this is the reason why I go on these shows, to get people to read, research, and think for themselves. Because the mainstream media, they're not just fake news. They're bought and paid for news. Bought and paid for by the oligarchs, by the powers that be, who have an addiction to power, money, and control. Rick?
I recommend everybody see the new movie, The Post. It has the good, the bad, and the ugly, all right there, as a snapshot of what happened with our media 30 years ago when they exposed and showed the Pentagon Papers. Today, the Washington Post is a sham. There's no longer, it's a payback of them against us. And there's a war going on that I don't understand, because I'm just basically a nerd. And, I'm not even being used today in that regard, because that's what I do best, is I'm the science guy. But I can tell you, even in that arena, I know that I don't know. And where technology is going today, it is absolutely frightening to me. And Kurzweil and the whole concept of the marriage in the brain-mind interface scares the bejesus out of me. And I mean really. It's a nightmare of the possibilities. And that's that's what Merlin said. Anything not specifically forbidden is mandatory. That means if it's even possible, you can count on it. And that's why we have this problem today, because it's all happening just like in the movies.
Yeah, very scary times. Well, what if the people decided to change things from the bottom up, and we were tired of the elite spending dollars to distract, dumb down, and divide us? What if the bottom 93% said no to GMO foods, hormones, steroids, antibiotics, vaccines, wars, geoengineering, pedophilia, and said no to fluoride, chlorine, and 200 other chemicals in our water, and said yes to adult mutual consensual sex and the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody to get a job, do hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications? What if, Rick, people started saying enough is enough and said, this is how we're going to change things from the bottom up? Do you think?
Well, that's the movie Network, where you yell out the window, I'm mad as heck, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And, that's it. It starts with individuals. And that movement is actually happening because I'm happening. I am simply a reflection of the rest of you. And while I might be a lead scout, I'm human, I'm not original, I'm just basically another voice in the darkness saying it. And because I'm saying it, I know it's happening. It's as simple as that. I remember when I didn't think about these things. And now that I am, I know you are.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And for those of you who have heard me on the radio, whether it be this USAPrepares.com or other shows, I always refer to myself as an ordinary, average Joe, non-hyphenated American. That means I'm not any better or smarter than 50% of you listening to this show. That means that anybody or most people can do most things if they try, and don't be a quitter and don't give up. But the most important thing is to stick for principle, stand for principle. And when you stand for principle, you have a chance to change things. And we have a break coming up. This is our last segment coming up of the morning. And we will see you on the other side, folks. Good morning, America. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today with our guest, Dr. Rick Miller. And when I was talking about standing for principle before the end of the break, I'm going to be redundant on this because it's so important. We need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, and not defined by aristocracy, serfdom, or what race, gender, sex, religion, or ideology or generation we're from. Secondly, we have to base everything on objective fact and truth in lieu of subjective emotional opinion. And if somebody does it or gets away with it with less consequences for their behavior, that's unacceptable. That means we should all do it. And if you don't like that because you say, oh, two wrongs don't make a right, then let's get together, American people, and talk about practice what you preach laws, which I talk about in almost every radio show. That being said, Rick, this is the last segment, buddy. I'm going to give you the floor, and please take it away.
Well, how about that shameless self-promotion thing I need? You know, I'm starving artist, and I'm trying to come out with 5 new titles this year alone. And so I need you, donations are wonderful, but I much prefer an exchange of value. So buy my books at richardallenmiller.com. And I don't know what is about to happen, but I can tell you that, how did they do in that horror movie? You're not going to like what happens next. Yeah, it's going to be just like in the movies. And it's okay, because if I am seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, is that death? I believe that everybody is, because I'm just your lead scout, and nothing in our world is original. That's why we share Nobel Prizes. Nothing is original. And even me, nothing. And so all of my ideas, all of my thoughts, they came from someone else. And so there it is, and we're uniquely different. And that's where the true answers are. They're not out there. They're inside you.
Well, Rick, I've listened to you for quite a few years now. We met when we spoke together down in Missouri at Vincent.
Oh, you're just one of my best fans and supporters. I cannot thank you enough, Rich.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'll tell you, and I'm not trying to, put a halo over Rick's head here, but folks, from what I've seen, he's very selfless, and he puts the little people of America first. And to me, that is a great base to build on. So if you could go to his website and see what he has to offer. And, Rick, would you please give your website out one more time, please?
Well, it's simple. That's why instead of calling me Dr. Rick or Dr. Rick Miller, call me Dr. Richard Allen Miller, because my website is richardallenmiller.com, A-L-A-N, richardallenmiller.com. My name is very common, and I am trying to be more uncommon.
Well, you have a cool first name, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I'm Dr. Ram. I'm the master of the mystic arts. I'm the real Dr. Strange, and watch what I do next.
Awesome. Well, folks, we talked about a lot today. We talked about having the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody on American soil. We talked about how the elite are distracting, dumbing down, and dividing the American people by groups. And the divide and conquer strategy has consequences that's beyond repair. And it's basically lowered the bars of standards and expectations, especially for getting a job and keeping a job. And that's the whole immigration debate. Why would an immigrant come here if they have no chance for prosperity and controlling their own destiny and having a better life, when only what group you come from matters? And what's wrong is now right. What's right is now wrong. So when we lower the bars of standards and expectations, which started with getting a job and keeping a job, it's destroyed America from within, because you don't empower a people or a group or an individual by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. America, thank you for listening to USAPrepares.com. I hope you all have a great weekend coming up. Take care. Rick, Dr. Richard Miller, thank you very much. You're always a great guest.